The sky burned with the fire of 1,000 ships descending upon Earth. The cities fell like dominoes torn apart by weapons beyond anything humanity had ever seen. Entire neighborhoods turned to ash in seconds as the Varkoth Empire unleashed its fury. The ground shook beneath the weight of their assault, and the air was filled with the deafening roar of explosions, and the screams of the dying humans were caught completely off guard. Earth had never faced an invasion like this. The military scrambled to respond, but their best efforts were useless against the alien technology. The Varkoth had the ships alone were enough to make Earth's air forces useless. The first wave wiped out entire battalions of soldiers before they could even get off the ground. Tanks and artillery were obliterated before they could fire a shot. The Varkoth didn't care about anything but total annihilation. They weren't here to conquer, they were here to wipe Earth off the map. Jack Carter had been a soldier before this. Before the war came to his doorstep, he had fought for his country and served in some of the most dangerous places on Earth. But nothing had prepared him for this. The assault on his home was unlike anything he had ever imagined. His family was gone in an instant. His wife, his son, both taken from him. When the first wave hit, he had tried to save them, tried to shield them from the destruction, but it was too late. Nothing was left in the wake of the bombs. Jack didn't know how he survived. It wasn't luck, it wasn't skill, it was sheer will to keep breathing, to keep moving forward. He had been in combat long enough to understand one thing: the world as he knew it was over. His home was gone, his people scattered and crushed under the boots of the invaders. But he wasn't done yet. Jack was far from done. As the last of the buildings crumbled and the sky grew dark with the smoke of war, he ran through the streets, not knowing where to go, not knowing what to do. He wasn't sure if he was chasing vengeance or simply trying to find another living soul, but he kept running until his legs gave out and his body crashed to the ground. He couldn't escape it, the gnawing feeling that he had failed, that humanity had failed, that his planet was slipping into the hands of something far worse than they could ever imagine. In that moment, Jack swore something deep inside him. He wasn't going to let Earth die without a fight. He would find a way to make them pay, every last one of them, the Varkoth, the ones responsible for this unimaginable destruction, and he would make them regret the day they set foot on Earth. For now, he was just one man alone in a destroyed city, but Jack Carter was going to show them what a human with nothing left to lose could do. The days after the fall of Earth blurred together in a blur of pain and confusion. Jack found himself wandering in the ruins of what used to be his home, his mind numb from the loss of everything he had ever known. He didn't know where to go or what to do, but he knew one thing: he couldn't just sit there and wait to die. As long as there was breath in his body, he would fight the Varkoth and anyone else who thought humanity was weak. Jack wasn't just going to be a survivor, he was going to be a weapon. But first he needed to find someone, anyone who could help him make that happen. He stumbled across a small group of humans, huddled in the remains of a collapsed building, their faces hollow from hunger and fear. They looked up when he approached, their eyes filled with distrust. They had seen too much suffering to trust anyone. Jack didn't care. He had nothing to lose. He needed information. He needed to know if there were others out there fighting back. He wasn't sure if they would talk to him or if they would even let him near them. But he wasn't leaving without answers. The group's leader was a woman named Lena. Her dark eyes were filled with a mix of anger and sorrow. Her face was marked with the scars of battle and loss. She had seen the same horrors Jack had seen, but she hadn't given up, not yet. She sized him up quickly, her gaze shifting from his tattered clothes to the haunted look in his eyes. "Who are you?" she asked, her voice hoarse with exhaustion. "I'm someone who wants to make them pay," Jack replied, his voice a low growl. He wasn't sure if she believed him, but she didn't send him away. She paused for a long moment, and then nodded to one of her people to let him in. They were a small resistance group, mostly scavengers hiding in the ruins, hoping to avoid the Varkoth patrols. Lena explained they weren't an army, they weren't even a real fighting force, but they had managed to stay off the Varkoth's radar long enough to be a thorn in their side. Jack didn't care if they weren't an army. He didn't need an army. All he needed was a chance to strike back, and if they could help him get closer to the Varkoth, maybe even learn where they were keeping the prisoners or find their supply lines, he would take it. He spent the next few days with them, scavenging for food and supplies, While listening to their stories of survival, of small victories, and devastating losses, each tale seemed more tragic than the last. But Jack took them all in with quiet intensity. He knew they were no longer just survivors, they were fighters, and they needed leadership. Jack began to train them not in conventional combat, but in the way of a guerrilla war against the Varkath. He showed them how to use the terrain to their advantage, how to be unpredictable, how to turn the enemy's strength into their weakness. By the time he left that small camp to pursue his first mission with them, they were no longer just a group of survivors. They were a resistance. Jack Carter had found his new purpose: to fight back, not just for vengeance, but to reclaim the future of humanity. The mission was supposed to be simple: a small Varkath supply convoy passing through an uncharted sector of the city was the perfect target. They would hit it fast, take out the guards, and grab whatever they could before disappearing into the ruins. But Jack wasn't interested in just raiding supplies. He wanted to send a message. He wanted the Varkath to know that humanity wasn't done with them. Not by a long shot. The plan was set. Jack and the small resistance group moved under cover of darkness, making their way to the convoy's route. They moved like shadows through the wreckage of the city, each step calculated, each breath silent. The convoy arrived just as planned, a dozen heavily armed Varkath soldiers marching in formation behind our transport vehicles. They didn't expect any resistance. The city was supposed to be abandoned. They were wrong. Jack had made sure of that. Without a word, the resistance struck in perfect synchrony. It wasn't chaos, it was a storm, one that the Varkath weren't prepared for. The first shot rang out, the signal that the ambush had begun. The Varkath didn't know where to turn. The humans were everywhere, from the rooftops, from alleyways. They attacked with a fury. The Varkath soldiers tried to fight back, but they were overwhelmed by the speed and precision of the humans. They had underestimated the desperation and skill that came with losing everything. The first few soldiers fell quickly, but Jack wasn't content to just pick them off from a distance. He was in the thick of it, moving with brutal efficiency. He wasn't just a soldier, he was a force of nature. Each strike was decisive, each movement an extension of his fury. Jack didn't stop to consider the consequences. He didn't think about anything except the mission and the message he wanted to send. With every Varkath soldier he took down, the resistance gained more confidence. They began to take risks. They pushed harder. They moved faster. They were no longer the desperate survivors hiding from their enemies. They were hunters picking off the invaders one by one. Jack's eyes were locked on the convoy's transport. He needed to destroy it before they could send for reinforcements. The resistance fighters cleared a path for him as he made his way toward the vehicle. The Varkath were beginning to regroup, but it was too late. Jack had already planted explosives on the transport. As he made his way back to the others, he could feel the tension in the air. The last of the soldiers were in retreat. The convoy was in ruins. The mission had been a success. But Jack wasn't done yet. He wanted to make sure the Varkath knew that they couldn't just destroy humanity and walk away without consequences. Jack detonated the explosives himself, watching as the transport exploded in a massive fireball, lighting up the night sky. The shockwave hit him hard, but he didn't flinch. The explosion sent a message loud and clear: the Varkath would not have Earth without a fight. And that fight was just beginning. The resistance was already planning their next move. When Jack looked up to the sky, he knew it wouldn't be long before the Varkath sent someone after them. But he didn't care. He had tasted victory, and he wanted more. The legend of the Ghost of Earth had begun. As the dust settled from the ambush, Jack stood over the wreckage, his heart still racing from the adrenaline. The resistance had succeeded in making a statement, but Jack knew this was only the beginning. The Varkath wouldn't take this lightly. They would send reinforcements, search for their attackers, and retaliate with ruthless efficiency. But Jack wasn't worried about that. The fight was just getting started, and he had a new goal now. He wasn't just going to hit back at random Varkath forces. He needed to understand them, to get inside their heads, to find a way to make them fear humanity in ways they never had before. He couldn't afford to keep fighting blind. Jack needed answers. Over the next few days, he worked closely with Lena and the other survivors to track down more Varkath movements. But as the weeks passed, the deeper they dug into the Varkath presence on Earth, the more they uncovered unsettling details. It wasn't just military aggression. The Varkuth had been conducting experiments on humans. Captive survivors were being taken to hidden facilities, undergoing strange tests. Jack's gut churned as he listened to the stories from the few remaining prisoners they'd managed to rescue. The Varkuth weren't just conquering Earth. They were trying to erase humanity itself. Lena had been part of a scouting mission that discovered a secret facility buried deep in the mountains. There, they found the bodies of several humans, mutilated and experimented on. The Varkuth were attempting to unlock something from the human genome, trying to understand why humans were capable of such raw, unpredictable violence and resilience. But they had never understood humanity's true strength, and now Jack was going to make them regret ever trying. He wasn't alone in his thirst for answers. A scientist among the resistance, Dr. Maris, had worked in genetic research before the war. She began collaborating with Jack, piecing together the fragments of information they had gathered. The Varkuth hadn't just been studying human biology. They were attempting to artificially enhance human capabilities, to tap into that deep well of power every human seemed to possess when they were pushed to their breaking point. And in the process, they had created something monstrous. Humans who had lost all control, enhanced beyond reason, and used as living weapons for the Varkuth's military. They had been created to be the perfect soldiers, brutal and unfeeling. Jack realized something deep within him had been awoken when he fought. He hadn't just survived, he had adapted. Something in his mind and body had shifted, pushing him beyond the limits he thought possible. The more Jack trained, the more he felt it. The raw power growing inside him. An instinctual drive to fight, to survive, to overcome. It wasn't just the human spirit anymore. This was something else. Something the Varkuth had unlocked by experimenting on his people, and Jack was beginning to feel it surge through his own veins. He wasn't just a soldier anymore. He was becoming something more. Dr. Maris theorized that humanity's strength lay not just in their ability to survive, but in their adaptability, their ability to evolve in the face of destruction. It was in their very DNA. And now Jack realized he was a living testament to that truth. He was becoming the thing the Varkuth feared the most, a human who had nothing left to lose and everything to gain. As Jack absorbed these revelations, his resolve hardened. The Varkuth would not take humanity without a fight. Not anymore. Jack was going to show them just how far humans could go when they were pushed beyond their limits. He wasn't just going to survive this war. He was going to win it. The days following their discovery of the Varkuth's experiments felt heavier than ever. Jack could see the change in the resistance. They were no longer just fighting to survive. They were fighting for something far greater. Each member had their own reasons, their own losses, but now they shared a common goal: to end the Varkuth threat once and for all. Jack, though, had become something else. He could feel the power surging within him. The enhancements the Varkuth had unwittingly unleashed. He wasn't the same man who had watched Earth burn. Now he was a weapon, and he would use that weapon to show the galaxy what humanity could do when pushed to its limit. The small victories against the Varkuth had emboldened the survivors. Jack's leadership had proven invaluable, and his strategic mind began to carve a new path for the resistance. His tactics were unconventional but effective. He relied on stealth, speed, and precision. He struck fast and vanished before the Varkuth could even regroup. His reputation was spreading across the galaxy. The Ghost of Earth, they called him, a symbol of humanity's defiance, and more terrifying than the Varkuth could have ever imagined. But Jack wasn't satisfied. Each raid, each victory felt like a small step towards something bigger, and he knew that without intelligence, without a true understanding of the Varkuth's inner workings, they would never be able to fully topple their empire. So Jack took a risk. He set his sights on one of the Varkuth's command centers, a heavily fortified structure nestled deep within enemy territory. If they could infiltrate it and steal their war plans, it could turn the tide in their favor. The mission was dangerous. It was almost suicidal. But Jack knew they had to take the chance. With Lena's guidance, the resistance began their preparation, carefully planning every step of the operation. It wasn't just a military strike. It was an intelligence mission, a way to find out how the Varkoth were organizing their efforts and where their next assault would come from. When the time came, Jack led the team into enemy territory under the cover of night. They moved like shadows, slipping through the gaps in the Varkoth's defenses. Jack's instincts were sharp, his enhanced senses picking up the slightest movement or sound. He could hear the hum of Varkoth communication channels and smell the faint scent of alien technology in the air. Everything felt heightened, his every move precise, calculated. They breached the outer perimeter, taking down the first line of guards without making a sound. The resistance fighters followed his lead, their confidence growing with every step. Jack could feel the weight of their hope on his shoulders. They were counting on him, and he would not fail them. They reached the command center's inner sanctum, a room filled with advanced technology and data they had never seen before. Jack and Dr. Maris quickly began to hack into the Varkoth systems, downloading critical intelligence on their plans and operations. But just as they were finishing, the Varkoth caught wind of their presence. Sirens blared, and the base went into lockdown. Jack cursed under his breath. They had to get out, and fast. The retreat was chaotic. The Varkoth were closing in, their soldiers flooding the halls. But Jack wasn't about to let them take him or his team. He fought his way through the corridors, each step more brutal than the last. The enhanced strength in his muscles seemed to multiply with every blow, and the resistance fighters, fueled by Jack's determination, fought with unmatched tenacity. They finally made it out, leaving the Varkoth base in shambles. The intelligence they stole would give the resistance an edge. The fight had escalated, and Jack was no longer just a soldier. He was becoming something more, a symbol of humanity's defiance and power. The Varkoth were no longer the hunters. Humanity was hunting them, and Jack Carter would be the one to lead them to victory. The success of the mission was a turning point for the resistance. With the stolen intelligence, they had learned the Varkoth's next move, a full-scale invasion of the human strongholds in the Outer Rim. The Varkoth thought they could crush humanity with a single blow, but they were wrong. Jack had already turned their arrogance into a weakness. The resistance, emboldened by the success of their mission, was no longer the ragtag group of survivors it had once been. They were a well-oiled machine, and Jack was the engine driving it forward. The base they had raided had been one of the Varkoth's primary command centers, but what they had uncovered was even more damning than expected. The Varkoth had been planning an all-out assault, but Jack's team had discovered that their forces were far less organized than they appeared. They were stretched thin, relying on overwhelming firepower to compensate for their lack of coordination. With the intelligence in hand, Jack began to formulate a strategy that would hit the Varkoth where it hurt most: their supply lines. Lena, Jack, and the rest of the resistance worked tirelessly to execute the plan. They had to move fast. The Varkoth would be regrouping and readying their attack within days, but Jack's mind was already racing, constantly calculating the best move. He knew the Varkoth were more dangerous than ever, but now they had the advantage. For once, it was the humans who were controlling the flow of the war. The first strike was a success. Jack led the resistance through a series of daring raids on Varkoth supply ships, cutting off the flow of fuel, weapons, and reinforcements. Each successful strike sent a message to the Varkoth. Their empire was vulnerable, and humanity had teeth. But Jack knew that these small victories weren't enough. It was time to bring the fight to them. The next step in his plan was a bold one: an attack on the Varkoth's main fleet stationed above Earth. Jack had no illusions about the danger they faced, but he knew the Varkoth were depending on their ships for control. Without their fleet, their entire operation would collapse. It would be a difficult, nearly suicidal mission. But the more Jack thought about it, the more it felt like the only way to turn the tide in their favor. The resistance began their preparations, modifying the stolen Varkoth tech to suit their needs. They'd repurposed alien technology to enhance their ships, creating a makeshift fleet ready to challenge the Varkoth. But even with the odds stacked against them, Jack knew this was their moment. They had nothing left to lose and everything to gain. The attack came swiftly. As Jack's fleet made its way to the Varkuth command ship, the Varkuth were caught off guard, their systems compromised by the previous raids. They weren't prepared for an attack from a fully coordinated human force. The battle was fierce. Jack's ship cut through the Varkuth fleet like a blade through butter. He led the charge, weaving through enemy fire, using his enhanced abilities to anticipate and dodge the incoming attacks. Every shot, every maneuver, felt like an extension of his will, an unstoppable force of nature. His people were counting on him, and Jack Carter wasn't about to let them down. The battle raged for hours, but Jack's relentless assault paid off. One by one, the Varkuth ships fell. Their fleet was shattered, their hold on Earth weakening. The final blow came when Jack boarded the command ship, taking down the Varkuth captain in a brutal hand-to-hand combat match that would go down in legend. The once unstoppable empire now lay crippled. When the dust settled, the resistance had won a decisive victory. The Varkuth no longer controlled the skies, and humanity had proven they were capable of standing toe-to-toe with their oppressors. Jack stood among his people, bloody but unbowed. The tide had turned. They weren't just fighting for survival anymore. They were fighting for victory, and Jack knew this was only the beginning. The Varkuth had underestimated humanity, but now they would understand that no empire could ever conquer the human spirit. The victory over the Varkuth fleet was nothing short of legendary. The skies over Earth were clear for the first time in months, the relentless presence of alien warships replaced by the fading echoes of battle. But even in the quiet aftermath, Jack knew the war wasn't over. The Varkuth had suffered a blow, but they were far from defeated. They were a ruthless, determined species, and they would retaliate with everything they had. In the weeks that followed, Jack and Lena worked tirelessly to solidify their position. The resistance had grown in size, attracting more survivors who were eager to join the fight. It wasn't just Earth anymore. Across the galaxy, other human colonies had caught wind of the victories, and they were starting to rebel too. The Varkuth's grip was slipping, but they were still a formidable force. Jack knew the next phase of the war would require more than just guerrilla tactics and surprise strikes. To win, they needed to hit the Varkuth where it would hurt most. At the heart of their empire, the Varkuth's homeworld, a planet deep within their star system, remained a nearly impenetrable fortress. It was there, Jack knew, that the Varkuth leadership resided. If they could cripple their command structure, they could break the Varkuth's will to fight. But Jack also knew the risk. This would be the most dangerous mission yet. In preparation, Jack called upon the brightest minds within the resistance. Dr. Maris, the geneticist who had become his closest confidant, had been researching Varkuth technology, and she came up with a plan to infiltrate their homeworld. It wasn't just about brute force anymore. They needed intelligence, sabotage, and precision. They needed to dismantle the Varkuth from the inside out. While the resistance prepared for the final assault, Jack couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed within him. His enhanced abilities had grown stronger since the Varkuth's experiments. He could feel the power surging through him, a force that was no longer just physical but mental too. His thoughts were sharper, his reflexes quicker, and his sense of purpose unwavering. But it wasn't just the enhancements that concerned him. It was the toll they were taking on his humanity. Jack had started to wonder if he was becoming too much like the creatures he was fighting against. Would he still be human when the war was over, or would he have lost himself in the violence? He pushed these thoughts aside. There was no time for doubt. Earth needed him. The universe needed him. And the Varkuth would pay for what they had done. The final plan was set. Jack and a small group of elite resistance fighters would infiltrate the Varkuth's homeworld, disable their planetary defenses, and create an opening for a full-scale invasion. The resistance had stolen enough Varkuth technology to use against them, but the Varkuth's defenses were still formidable. Jack's team would need to move quickly, strike without hesitation, and survive long enough to allow the main human forces to arrive. The night before the mission, Jack stood on the balcony of the Resistance's temporary command center, overlooking the horizon. Earth had been through so much, but now it was on the brink of a new future, a future where humanity could stand tall once again. Jack wasn't sure what would happen tomorrow, or what the cost of this final mission would be, but one thing was certain: he was ready to give everything for the future of his people. He turned and walked back inside, joining the team for their final briefing. They were all aware of the risks. Some might not make it back, but Jack's resolve was unshakable. They would finish this. They would take down the Varkoth for good. And no matter what happened, Jack knew they would leave behind a legacy that the galaxy would remember forever. The day of the final assault arrived with an oppressive silence. The entire resistance had gathered, waiting for the signal to strike. Jack stood in the middle of the command center, the hum of the consoles surrounding him, but his mind was elsewhere. His team, his people, were depending on him. Earth was depending on him. This was it, the decisive moment. Either humanity would crush the Varkoth once and for all, or they would fall, swallowed by the alien empire they had fought so desperately against. There was no middle ground. The mission had been set into motion. Jack and his hand-picked team were aboard the stealth ship that would carry them to the Varkoth's homeworld. Their job was simple: sabotage the Varkoth planetary defenses, take out their leadership, and pave the way for the full-scale invasion that would follow. They had no backup, no reinforcements. If they failed, there would be no one left to stop the Varkoth from wiping out every human on Earth. The journey to the Varkoth homeworld felt endless, even though it was only a matter of hours. As they approached the planet, Jack could feel the tension building. Every fiber of his being was alert, every instinct honed. The enhanced abilities that had made him a weapon were now sharper than ever. But as they closed in, a new realization gnawed at him. He was no longer just a soldier. He was a force of nature. The Varkoth had tried to shape humanity into something they could control, something they could exploit. But in doing so, they had created a weapon that would destroy them. The ship broke through the atmosphere of the Varkoth homeworld, cloaked in darkness, invisible to the sensors. Jack's team descended toward the heart of the planet, knowing that their window of opportunity was fleeting. As they neared their target, the first wave of Varkoth defenses tried to lock onto them. But Jack and his team moved too fast. The stealth technology they'd stolen allowed them to avoid detection, just barely. They landed in the shadow of the Varkoth capital city, a massive fortress of alien architecture. Jack and his team deployed quickly, moving in silence through the labyrinth of city streets. The Varkoth's presence was everywhere, but they were still unaware of the human strike force that was already inside their walls. The first obstacle was the Varkoth's planetary defense system. Jack's team set charges on the primary power grid, cutting off the planet's communication and surveillance. As the system collapsed, chaos erupted. The Varkoth scrambled to understand what had happened, but by then, it was too late. The team made their way toward the central command building, where the Varkoth leadership was located. When they breached the command center, Jack was ready. His enhanced strength, speed, and instincts made him a blur of motion. The Varkoth soldiers inside never stood a chance. Jack fought with a ferocity he had never known, moving like a storm through the enemy ranks. The Varkoth tried to fight back, but they were no match for the human fury that had been unleashed. The team pushed forward, and Jack's heart pounded as they reached the command room. There, they found the Varkoth High Command, leaders of the Empire who had set Earth's destruction into motion. The final confrontation was brutal. Jack's strength and enhanced senses allowed him to anticipate their every move. The Varkoth leader, a towering alien, lunged at him with a weapon, but Jack was faster. In a flash, he disarmed the alien, throwing him to the ground. His eyes met the Varkoth leader's, and he didn't hesitate. With a swift motion, Jack ended the threat. The command center was in flames as the building began to collapse around them. Jack's team set the final charges and made their escape, racing through the crumbling city toward their extraction point. As they boarded their ship, the explosion rocked the planet, sending shockwaves through the Varkoth infrastructure. The heart of their empire was broken. Jack stood at the helm of their ship as they ascended from the planet's atmosphere. The Varkuth were finished. Their leadership had been decimated, their defenses crippled, and the galaxy would never forget the day humanity fought back. Jack's chest swelled with pride, but there was a quiet weight in his heart too. The war was over, but he had become something more than just a soldier, a weapon forged in the fires of destruction. He had lost so much, but he had given everything to save Earth. And in the end, humanity had won. The stars outside the ship were quiet, but Jack knew that humanity's future would never be the same. It wasn't just the victory they had won. It was the message they had sent. The galaxy would remember the day they faced the Varkuth and showed them the full might of a human with nothing left to lose.